Today is the 15th day of February in the year 2026, and this is video number 9, I do believe, in the sequence that I've been doing. I didn't make one last week. Somehow I couldn't motivate myself. I couldn't find why I was doing this, still puzzled, but still feeling the need to give it another go. So I'm going to speak off the cuff again for 10 to 15 minutes at whatever I fancy, just whatever comes to mind. The one thing I wanted to start with was just if you can consider this simple concept and think about it. A child comes into this world. A child comes in with a completely empty space to fill with knowledge. And that is going to impact that child's whole life. So every fragment that a child reaches out for, almost from the day they're born, they pick it up and store it, and somehow or other it becomes part of their life. Now we as parents have to place a great responsibility on that, because as we all know, because we have lived through it, that from the day we were born, that we were faced with exactly the same thing, and that being an impressionable young being, you begin to trust, of course, those people who nurture and care for you initially in life. An interesting statistic, or not a statistic, an interesting observation I heard recently was from a woman who spent some time with native tribes. She said that in all the time that she'd spent with native tribes, she had scarcely ever heard a baby crying. The mothers in those tribes carried the children close to them so that they could feel their skin, the warmth of their heartbeat for, I don't know, up to the first couple or 3 years of life. And the children were always kept with them and had a feeling, a sense of security, at least for that first period. And obviously, again, if we imagine the most idyllic settings for rearing children, you know, we probably think of sunny, natural places with children growing up in harmony with the parents, a mother and the father, other older children, cousins, neighbours, all to a degree living in harmony where they have common purpose. Common purpose to me would be, well, first of all, survival, but just going a bit above survival. You know, if I imagine even going back to my young days, although I didn't grow up on a farm, there were farms all around me, smallish farms, and the families there worked with common purpose to grow food and provide. Although the circumstances, I suppose, weren't great financially immediately after the war and so on, but it meant that a husband and wife worked together on a farm at the same job, trying to keep to keep flesh and bone together by the livestock that they had and so on. And obviously that built a bond. And as children came into the world, I'm watching here for a wee dog. I don't know if you can see. I'm here wandering along behind me. I'm at Ballypatrick Forest today, which is between Cushendall and Ballycastle. Anyhow, you can get the idea that a husband and wife working together, common purpose, running a little farm, ideally without the interference of state, and just living in harmony with neighbours, with no taxes to pay, just living off the land. You know, I imagine everyone can build up some kind of idyllic picture of that. You know, we've come to this supposedly sophisticated age, and are we any better off? You know, we have gadgets and motor cars and whatever, but we have lost that common purpose because we now get a situation where we bring a child into the world and the family is fragmented by the circumstances of life, where parents each go out separately to a job, and instead of strapping that child to the mother, you know, it's got to be dropped with daycare, as they call it in America, and, well, preschools and all kinds of things here. When I was going to primary school, I didn't go until 5 years of age. That was back about 1960. Well, now that age has got, really, it's down to less than one, because I suppose a mother might stay off on maternity leave for a period of, I don't even know what maternity leave is now, but let's say for 6 months or a year even. And then they're forced by financial circumstances to drop that child into a play school, and however good that play school might be, or preschool, that is some kind of traumatic event for the child, for suddenly it's lost the balance in the world. You know, it's a shock to the system. Of course, the other big influence in any child's life is the television, because it's so easy to drop children in front of a television. And when I talked earlier of the blank slate of that child's mind, if you sit alongside your children and watch those TV programs, and that's an interesting word, a TV program through a TV channel on a television, you know, it's not tell the truth, it's tell a vision through a TV program on a TV channel. You just watch that program critically along with your child, and just watch what has been fed into your child's mind. For example, I've seen something recently where even in little Walt Disney movies, they'll have a program start off with maybe the mother of a little innocent looking animal dying, and you know, you just imagine the impact that has on the very small child, because these things, they do have impact. If you imagine that can be the case, and it might look like only a little innocent story from Disney with a little baby deer, the mummy dying, and a little deer being sad and a tear dripping from its eye, and it all goes to your heart and so on. But you really have got to look at this as perhaps a devious control method, you know, because that's the only conclusion I can come to, is that there's nothing innocent about this stuff at all. If you really start being critical about any of it, that it's there for a purpose, and it's there to take over that little child's mind from day one. It's been happening. My first memory of television was before I had a television, and I know I must have been around about the age of 7 or 8 when I first heard of the Beatles. And the neighbours where I lived at that time did have a television, and my older brothers and sisters they went in to watch the Beatles. And in my innocent mind, I wasn't yet of that age that I was watching the beetles. In my innocent mind, I wondered why they were going to watch beetles when they could see beetles outside. I knew of the little insect. I just remember that. But it makes me think back then to how the Beatles and the Rolling Stones and all those things that were on television at the time, how they were definitely used to manipulate whole populations. And I know that now from daring to look behind the scenes and to see what was really going on, even back then. And people of my vintage and people younger will know of the mass hysteria that was created by groups like the Beatles. And I can only imagine now that some of the screaming girls and so on, that was very, very easy to manipulate because it was probably not organic, that there were maybe 10 or 20 girls paid to go and scream and shout at the Beatles frantically at a concert, and then the others would join in and create then the illusion that it was all organic. But it had great impact on society, and at about that time, then young people were, of course, encouraged to leave the farms and to leave the innocence of family life and to go to university. And when I went to university, teacher training college, 18 years of age, when I look back, I was still quite young and vulnerable, and I had a certain sense of insecurity even leaving home at that time, because circumstances dictated then, as they do now, that you have to leave the family home at least for 5 days in a week, as I did, because I was able to go to Belfast and come home at the weekend. But of course it introduces you to freedom and other influences and alcohol and people of both sexes living together in student halls and so on, and the obvious attractions of all of that to young people, and the whole pop culture, everything, all just seems to me was absolutely designed to fragment the stability of the family, the morality of the family, and to leave young people in a mixed up mess wondering what it's all about. If you compare that to the young man who stayed at home and worked the farm and got a proper education in real things in nature, we were led to believe that by going and training as I did as a teacher for 3 years, from 18 years of age to 21, that then I was expected to be wise enough and skilled enough to come out and teach the new generation. Which makes me think that even then, not long after that or from about that time, that the older hands in the teaching trade were encouraged to leave early. The old wise heads were given pensions I know of at least one person, who got a pension at 53 years of age. And everything was handed over to new young teachers, and we were told, yeah, it's good to bring in a bit of youth for a bit of novelty, and because they were bringing in all kinds of new technology at that time. And they wanted rid of the old sensible heads, those people who had a bit of wisdom and provided a bit of stability and weren't going to be as easily led. And you can just see how it all drifted down to today, when I don't know how many people are aware of it. I'm not very aware of it myself because I don't have children at school. I do have grandchildren, but the way that sexuality is introduced at such an early age, and parents really aren't fully aware of it. I've seen it, people talk about it online and illustrate some of the books and so on, and that are they're put in there by education authorities, and who give them that authority? Anyway, you can see the rabbit hole that I'm going down. I'm having a look at my clock and it says about 15 minutes. I'm surprised I managed to ramble on for 15 minutes about the things that are, well, somewhere in the back of my mind troubling me at least a little today. I had some other things coming up in my mind, but I'll leave that until next week because I don't want to go any longer than about the 15 minutes. I'm enjoying the rest of the walk here with the dog for about another half hour, and then I'll go into Ballycastle for a coffee. Bye for now.